Greetings, travelers, and welcome to Hell. I'll be your guide this lovely evening. Our first fact for today. Sand tiger sharks' embryos eat each other even before being born. What does that mean? Well, I'm glad you asked. Let me explain. So imagine this is the shark. So say this is the female shark. She has like these pods, kind of. One on the left, one on the right. There's like these pods. So she has the pods up here and down here. And these pods get filled with embryos, essentially. Unborn developing sharks. There's all these embryos all over. And then they eat each other. Nom 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 nom. There's an embryos battle royale where if you die in the game, you die in real life. And only the winner gets to be born. Actual spawn camping in nature is wild. Yeah, pretty much. Only the most fittest and the best embryo gets to survive. Now, this seems kind of cool to do, but the reason why you do this is the same reason why all the sperms have to like race to see which one can reach the egg. It's to filter out the unworthy. You only want those that aren't born with problems and that can grow fast and big and strong. So how do you do that? Well, you just make a bunch of them and then have them compete. This thing already happens in nature with animals that have a lot of babies in the same spot. It's not uncommon that they outcompete each other. And sometimes they might even directly eat each other. That's just how nature works when you have a lot of babies. And this is literally the point, to have a lot of babies, to make sure that by pure statistics, some of them are going to be extremely fit and extremely good for their environment, so they're just going to survive more than the other ones. This just makes things faster and already starts the competition in the womb. There is reason why you want to do this before they come out into the world, because as any good parent would know, taking care of kids is a lot of responsibilities, even if you're a shark. So the less kids you have to worry about, the better. Why waste your resources on kids that aren't gonna make it anyway and are just gonna die out there in a while? Might as well put all of your effort and energy into the ones that you know are actually gonna make it. Alright, let's talk about the next fact. Honeybees will build little jails with designated jailer bees for hive beetles that get into the nest. Imagine you're a bee colony. You're a bee colony, you have a lot of bees, but other than bees, there might be other stuff, like honey. The fact that there's a lot of honey is very good for you if you're a bee, because you eat the honey, you build stuff with it, you use it for stuff. It's very useful. But like any place with a lot of resources that is thriving, there is going to be people that want to pilfer from them. They want to come in and they want to steal their stuff. This is why there's a lot of animals that can mimic bees in certain ways, whether they kind of look like them or they emit pheromones. They emit pheromones that make the bees think they're one of their own. They have a bunch of tricks. And one of those invaders is the hive beetles. Hive beetles will go into bees' nest and then just ask the bees for food, essentially. They will just tell bees, hey, I'm also a bee. Feed me, give me food. The hive beetles will usually hide away in the darker corners of the nest, where so that like the bees wouldn't find them and only come out if they need something. I'm not sure if the hive beetles eats bees or larvae instead, but a lot of bee imposters do in fact munch on the bees. You know that scene from you know the anime Parasite, where there are these things that look like human but aren't, and if they get a chance they will just munch on another human. This is the world that bees have to live in. Things that pretend to be bees but aren't, and at any moment can just eat a bee. So what do? Bees don't actually have a lot of attack power. Sure, they have stingers, but stinging would kill them. They can't actually do much in terms of fight. Like, they're not hornets. Hornets and wasps are basically murder machine. Nothing messes with them. Nothing messes with them because they're murder machines. The hive beetles like to hide inside of the nest, and once they're in, you just find the section that they're in and just make a wall. Make a wall that blocks them. That's literally what bees do. They will build a jail cell that makes sure that the hive beetle can't get out, and then they will wait for the hive beetle to starve to death. And they will even have designated jailer bees who will stay there to watch the hive beetle. Now, there is just one problem, because the hive beetle is so good at pretending to be a bee. It can trick the jailer bee into giving it food. Because bees have certain signaling that they do to each other, which is like, feed me, I'm hungry. And then they will feed each other. Because bees they are living beings, they're also kind of like machines that follow certain programming rules. Because insects in general are very tiny, and so they have small brains, and so they don't have much capacity for thought. A lot of the ways that they act is very instinctual. And one of the instincts that bees have is to feed. And the hive beetles know to activate this instinct. So they can make the jailer bees feed them, which means that they're not gonna starve in their jail. And then if something bad happens to the colony and the colony starts declining, then the hive beetle might eventually get out and do some chaos. Right. Next fact. All human babies come out prematurely, which is why they can't walk after being born. Have you ever seen a baby monkey? Within an hour of being born, bam! Already climbing trees, walking around, doing stuff. Have you seen a baby giraffe? An hour after being born, and they already run around and do whatever it is that giraffes do. Not only them, but most mammals, in fact. Especially with marine ones. So like dolphins and whales, because they have to swim as soon as they're born. They have to swim or they freaking drown, because they need to go out to the surface to breathe air. So it's not like 1 hour, okay, but it isn't like 1 hour, but monkeys can walk a lot faster than human toddlers. Humans take a year until they start walking. Why are human toddlers basically incapable of doing anything except sleep, eat, shit, and cry? The reason why is because human babies come out prematurely. They're not fully developed yet. And the reason why is because the brain is too big. Straight up, it's too big. If the baby continued developing in the womb until it reached where it's mature, then the head would be too big to get out of the vagina. So that's why they come out premature when they're almost ready, and then they just finish maturing outside. Actually, human babies aren't the only one that come out prematurely. Marsupials also come out prematurely. So like kangaroos, for example, you know that they have the sack that the kid sits in. That's why they have the sack, because the kid comes out premature, and then it goes in the sack, and it basically acts like an external womb. There's like a titty and a milk duct inside of the womb, inside of the pocket, so that the kangaroo baby can suckle and drink milk and whatnot, while it continues developing outside of the womb. Except that marsupials have a different problem. They don't do it because of head size. They do it because they don't have a placenta, which means that they can only keep the baby so long before they can only keep him inside before it's getting really hard to get resources and get stuff to the baby. Because the placenta is an incredibly important organ. It's basically almost all of your organs smooshed into once. It acts like the embryo's lungs, heart, kidneys, liver. It does, because you still need to do the stuff. Just because you're in the womb and you're still developing doesn't mean you don't have to do the stuff to keep yourself alive. You still need to do them. So you need something that is gonna do them, and that thing is the placenta. And because of the placenta, you can stay in the womb a lot longer, because it takes care of all the needs. The biggest cell in the human body is in fact in the outer membrane of the placenta, and that's because it's basically a bunch of cells that are fused together. So there's just like this, technically one enormous cell. It's spread out so that it has as much surface area as possible. So it's built like the way that your lungs are built. Their job and its job is to absorb stuff. It has to absorb stuff from the mother's bloodstream. Stuff like oxygen and nutrients and salts that without them you would die. Let's go to the next food. Ethanol itself is not so bad, but then your body breaks it into acetyl... Oh, hang on. I can say this. Watch me. Acetaldehyde, which is super toxic. So where does ethanol actually comes from? Great question. Thank you for asking. Start with a sugar molecule, aka glucose. It's shaped like a ring. And then the glucose gets turned into the pyruvate. So you have this step, and then if there is oxygen in your body, the next step would be, I promise, this is important, okay? This ties in later. This then goes into the like Krebs cycle or the citric acid cycle. So anyway, this is the first step that you have, and this is pretty universal. This happens in fungus, in plants. This happens inside of your own body. And then if you have oxygen, then if you have like O2, then this step gets initiated. But what happens if you don't? Well, in your body, it will then turn into lactic acid. But in yeast, which is famous for making alcohol, something a little different is going to happen. See, so during this process, something special happens. You see, there are these molecules. Basically, you have NADH, and this NADH, NAD plus is what's known as an electron carrier. It literally grabs electrons from the glucose molecule, and then it becomes NADH. And it also combines with like a water, with like a hydrogen from probably a water molecule. And then this thing carries electrons. Why do you want it to carry electrons? Because you need it for the third step. For the third step of metabolism, which is where you make most of the, pretty much most of the energy. But there is a very big problem. If you want to continue, if you don't want to use oxygen and you want to just continue breaking down glucose into pyruvate, because this gets you energy. This costs 2 ATP, and you get 4 ATP out of it. So you can just keep doing this infinitely and get energy. But there is a problem. You're gonna accumulate too much NADH. Eventually you're gonna run out of NAD plus and accumulate a lot of NADH. So you're gonna have to fix something. You're gonna have to fix something. You're gonna have to make this go into a loop. You're gonna have to loop this. So you need another reaction. And that reaction is, first of all, you take the pyruvate and you turn it into the acetaldehyde. We'll call it ACTL. And then you turn it into ethanol. Or in its more common name, alcohol. This reaction right here is what allows the NADH to turn into NAD+, because it deposits the electrons into the ethanol, pretty much. So what you get is, you get this acetaldehyde plus carbon dioxide. So you get also carbon dioxide from this, which is why bread rises when you put yeast in it, because the yeast is breathing out CO2, and the CO2 is making little pockets of air that makes the bread rise and be very delicious. So let's talk about this part, because it's the most important part. Now, we all know and we all love ethanol, which is great. When your body takes ethanol, it tries to break it down by essentially doing the reverse of this. Your body wants to metabolize the ethanol, so it wants to take the ethanol and get it back to the Krebs cycle, where it can make it out. Because the ethanol has energy in it. It used to be sugar. It can be broken down. You can get energy out of it. So in order to do that, this process is basically reversed, which means that you take the ethanol and you turn it, and you first turn it into ACT. Now, at this point, the best next step would have been to turn it back into pyruvate, because pyruvate is fine. You don't want too much pyruvate in your body, but your body knows what to do with it. The problem though is that, remember this pesky carbon dioxide that got out? So you can't actually go back from or at least your body doesn't really go back from the ACTL back to pyruvate. So instead, you just get stuck with this annoying, nasty, toxic molecule that is very reactive. Because remember, the goal, this is part of the metabolism pathway, so it's supposed to react with stuff. You want it to react with stuff so that you can make it do things. Your cells do not normally use the ACTL like this, and they don't want it, and they can't handle it very well. So instead, it just fixes you up by reacting with everything. And this is why it does a lot of damage. It's very good at doing liver damage as well, because that's where the ethanol... Because your liver pulls out the ethanol from your liver, and I think kidneys as well. They pull out like the ethanol and stuff when they detoxify your blood. And then they break it down. This conversion from ethanol to ACTL is actually harder the more ethanol you have. The more ethanol you have, the less ethanol gets broken into ACTL. And this is one of the reasons why scientists think that if you drink more, it delays a hangover. It will delay the hangover because you keep having the ethanol inside of you, but you don't get the super toxic and nasty ACTL. Now, of course, this means that you still have a ton of ethanol inside of you. So when eventually you're gonna get the hangover, you're gonna have more ACTL, and so it's gonna be even worse. And by the way, just FYI, the next step after this, after your body turns the ethanol into the ACTL, it then gets turned into it skips the pyruvate stage again because the CO2 broke off here, so you can't turn it back into pyruvate. And instead, it just turns it into like ACTCOH. Pyruvate would have turned into this as well. At this point, it's pretty safe. At this point, it's just your standard metabolism pathway. Your body knows what to do at that point. It's really this stage with the ethanol and the ACT that shit just hits the fan pretty much. See, this is why I got the board, so I can draw stuff. So just to recap, because I know this is very confusing. Stay with me. This is very confusing. In a normal pathway, you start with the glucose, and then you turn it into pyruvate, and in that process, the NAD plus grabs electrons and then becomes NADH. See, that's why it loses the plus, because it grabs electrons, and electrons are negative. And when you take the negative charge and you add it to the positive charge, it cancels out. And you also get ATP out of it, which is the currency of energy in your body, so you get energy out of it. And then you get the pyruvate. Normally, the pyruvate would then turn into ACTCOH in like the normal metabolism pathway. But with yeast, they do something. They can do this, but also they can choose not to do this and instead turn it into ACT and CO2. And then they will take the ACT and they will turn it into ethanol so that they get their NAD plus back. They take the electrons that they took from the glucose, and they put it back into the glucose. The circle of life. Everything is a circle in nature. They don't call it the circle of life for no reason. It's all circular. Literally, the yeast literally went, boss, we have too much electrons. We're gonna have to do something with them. I don't know, just put it back where you found them. And it freaking works. Double it and give it to the next person. Next fact. Box jellyfish have 24 eyes. I don't know what to tell you. Box jellyfish, one of the most venomous jellyfishes in the world, and they kind of look like a box. They have eyes. They have this they have this cluster. It looks like they have just two in the picture, but that's not actually what's happening. They have this like clusters of eyes where they would have like 6 eyes in the same spot. And then it's like they have 4 of this, with each having 6, or the other way around, where they have 6 clusters with 4 eyes in each. One of the two. I don't remember which way it is. And then, yeah, that's how they see. I included this fact because it's funny as hell. Look at them, they look so goofy. They look so silly. The thing about jellyfish have rudimentary even if they don't have eyes, they have rudimentary vision, sort of. They can sense light. They can like sense light and stuff. So they can orient themselves. But there's not much point in having eyes because they can't swim. box jellyfish can't swim either. If they have eyes, the only reason to do this is so that they can move their tentacles and grab their prey. In which case, it fully depends on what it is they're eating. Maybe the thing that they're eating is harder to catch than the other jellyfish, so they had to evolve a more precise, the ability to use their tentacles in a more precise manner. Alright, next fact. Comb jellyfish evolved their neurons independently, which is why their brains work differently than the rest of the animals. The short version is that they split off before neurons became a thing, which is why they have their own version, and their version, in their version, the neurons are combined. They don't have gaps. There's literally just a neural net that's just one giant cell that's connected. They don't have the synapses, which in my opinion is a horrible way to go about it. See, the advantages to doing this is that it would be a lot faster because you only rely on the electricity and you don't rely on the chemical messaging. But it does mean that you're losing out on accuracy, and it does mean that you're losing out on accuracy and diversity, because chemicals, while they may be slower, they give you a lot more options for the neurons to express themselves than signaling via electricity. Okay, so neurons essentially have two ways of communicating. The first one is from one neuron to another, which is the synapses. These are gaps. They're not open, like they're closed, so the chemicals don't just go out. But anyway, these are gaps where chemicals move from tiny chemicals move from one neuron into the other one. Now this is slow, but because you can use a lot of chemicals and you can change the amount of every chemical that you use, it gives you a lot of options regarding what you want to say. The other option of communication that neurons have is between the same neuron, and that is if a message wants to reach from one side of the neuron to the other, essentially. And this happens via electricity. This happens via the electricity, and this is extremely quickly. This is way faster than the chemicals. It's traveling at like, 70 kilometers per hour, I want to say. The problem is, though, that you're very limited by your ways to express yourselves. Now, the only thing that you can control is the frequency of the bursts. You can only control how fast and how many bursts of electricity you get. All the bursts of electricity have the same power, essentially. It's not that if there's a stronger stimulation, then it will make a bigger wave. If there's a stronger stimulation, then it's just gonna have more waves, essentially. Comb jellyfish just went, I don't need this, actually. And so they don't have it. They just have the electricity. For them it works because comb jellyfish don't need much. They're very simple. They're very small. They don't do much, frankly. They are predators. They are active hunters, though. They actively hunt their prey, which is very cool. They eat like plankton, algae, stuff like that. Plankton, algae, maybe fish too. What I mean by they split off earlier, but why do they have like their own version when every other animal uses something else? And if they have their own versions, why is it similar? Why is it so similar? Like, if they were gonna make their own thing, wouldn't it be incredibly different and unique? It kind of is incredibly different and unique. They don't have gaps. They don't have gaps. They just have this one giant cell inside of them. The reason why it's not that different is because when the neurons started like evolving, the neurons didn't make everything up from scratch. All the chemicals, the signaling. Sure, the signaling and using electricity might be new, but the building blocks that they used to build the neurons, like the chemicals that actually do the electricity, the chemical communication, the stuff that makes the neuron ticks, those things already existed. Living beings just took them and made them and like put them in a new combination that does something new. So comb jellyfish did the same, which is why they get something which is slightly different because they put it in a different combination, but also it's the same building blocks. So you end up with something that is, while it may be different, it's also very similar. Regarding when they actually split off, they were they were incredibly early on split. Like if we're looking at the Tree of Life, then we'll find bacteria, then single cell, blah, 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 blah. Eventually you get multicellular life forms, very simple multicellular life forms, and then you get the first kind of group, which is the Cnidarians. So Cnidarians is one of the first group. It basically means stuff that stings. We're talking about jellyfish, anemone. Here we have like jellyfish and sea anemones. Even before the jellyfish and the sea anemone, you have sponges. They don't even have muscles, which Cnidarians have, by the way. Anemones have muscles. And then the first one, and this is a huge debate actually, which one split off first, the sponges or the comb jellyfish. So these are some of the first animals. They split off so early that they aren't even bilaterals. Bilaterals means that you can cut them in half and they'll be symmetric. Most animals are bilateral to a degree. Right, like obviously there can be some changes, but animals tend to be symmetrical, but not very ancient ones. Not stuff like jellyfish, not stuff like anemone. Now, jellyfish and anemone tend to be radially symmetrical, which means that they kind of have symmetry, but it's not a bilateral kind of symmetry. So, for example, starfish are, their arms are symmetrical, pretty much. If you look at the jellyfish from the top and you cut a line, it would be pretty symmetrical. They basically have nothing. They don't have muscles. They have like their own finger of nerves. Now, okay, look. When you look at something like this and you're hearing split off, what you're probably thinking in your mind is, oh, so they stopped evolving. So like everything else kept evolving until we get like humans. That's not what happened. Drawing it like this is kind of misleading. What actually happened is that they kept evolving. They were just on their own trajectory, doing their own thing, unrelated to fish, unrelated to amphibians. But yeah, and then they just did their own thing. They just did their own thing, which is why they're very different from other animals. Alright, but that's enough. I'll do a lesson some other time about... like the pathway to human. How to make a human from scratch. But now let's talk about the last fact for today, which is about 0.01% of human DNA is parasitic and selfish. Let me introduce you to a dear old buddy of mine, which I have hated ever since learning what he does. His name is Line 1, which is an extremely generic name. It's like going to a gene and calling it Gene 1. Line 1 is a special segment in your DNA which is capable of replicating itself. Line 1 encodes for instructions on how to make more line 1s and shove them into the DNA. Scary stuff, man. If line 1 is kept unchecked, then it can take over your entire DNA and just fill it with garbage. This is the same as playing Slay the Spire and just picking a bunch of cards in your deck that don't do anything. So then you end up wasting all of your energy on meaningless actions instead of actually using it for what counts. But not to worry, because your cells know about line 1 and they have even domesticated it to a degree. Your DNA, a lot of it is made up of line 1 or remnants of it. Go figure, there's this thing that can replicate itself, and it replicated itself a lot, which is why very large chunks of your DNA are made out of this. But your DNA, your cells wouldn't let that stop them. They actually did something productive with it. Having junk is bad, but there are advantages to it. If you keep junk around, one day you can get a mutation that would actually make it do something useful. Nowadays, most of the line 1 junk that's in your cells actually has a use. It's been mutated and changed so that it does something different now. It does something different now, and it's incredibly important for your health, for the healthy functions of your cells. Line 1 is not the only thing that was domesticated. There is also ancient virus DNA of ancient viruses that infected like the sperm of your distant ancestors, pretty much, and just lodged its DNA into them. If we're talking about ancient virus DNA, then ancient virus DNA it's not like it's a ticking time bomb that one day will just erupt and just make a bunch of viruses inside of you. No, it's so ancient that it's gone through many changes, and now it does something else. You've taken the abilities that the virus has and you use them to make something else. One of those things is the placenta, by the way. The placenta would not have been possible in the way that it currently is without ancient virus DNA. But if you want to talk about something which is an actual bomb in your DNA, which can fuck you up if it activates, line 1. In healthy cells, they can restrain it. Healthy cells can turn it off. Surprise, if you didn't know, your cells can activate and deactivate genes and can suppress or enhance them, because sometimes there's a certain gene which is great, but you don't want to use it right now. Like the gene for making a lot of body hair because it's cold outside and you want a fur coat. A lot of animals have it, but it's usually kind of turned off, so like it doesn't do the thing that it does, and then it only gets activated in cold weathers. So kind of like that. Line 1 is usually deactivated in most cells, although with the right mutation and the right circumstances, it can activate. This actually happens in cancer, because cancer keeps mutating and cancer doesn't control its DNA very well. Cancer a lot of times will start making line 1. This is actually very important information, because scientists may be able to detect the existence of line 1 and use it to determine if you have cancer, pretty much. So yeah, that's pretty neat. Also, I just want to mention this because it's extremely funny. The way that line 1 copies itself is by encoding the instructions for 2 proteins, and their name is ORFH1 and ORFH2. They literally call them Orphan 1 and Orphan 2. They took the thing, they took the gene named Thing 1 and gave it children that are named Thing number 1 and Thing number 2. Man, whoever named this was just holy lack of effort, Batman. Orphan genes are genes that we essentially don't know where they come from. So if you find the same gene in a bunch of different species, you can go, oh, I see where it came from. There was one thing in the past that had this gene, and then all of its children had it. So now a bunch of things have it. But sometimes there's a gene which only exists in one place, which only exists in like one species, and you're like, how did this get here? How do you activate genes? Is it a trick with the zip? It depends, but your hormones can do it. So essentially, okay, so the way that it works, the genes stay the same. You don't touch the genes, but in order for a gene to actually do something, it needs to bind with like RNA polymerase. So you've got RNA polymerase which binds to it, and then it starts producing RNA. This RNA then gets sent. This RNA then gets turned into another version of RNA, which gets sent outside of the cell and into the ribosomes. And your ribosomes are basically protein factories. They're basically tiny factories. Out comes something which is called a polypeptide, which is a chain of amino acids that eventually folds into becoming a protein. In order for a gene to work properly, it needs this step. It needs the RNA polymerase to do its freaking job. But, as it turns out, you can fuck with the RNA polymerase in many interesting and unique ways. Some of the things that you can do to it is you can, for example, put a protein on the DNA that makes it more likely for RNA polymerase to bind. So when you do this, it makes it more likely that the certain segment of DNA will actually end up producing an RNA. Or you can put proteins that stop it from binding. Basically, you can weaken or enhance the probability that RNA polymerase is gonna touch the thing and generate an RNA. And because of this, these can be affected by hormones. And this can also be affected by DNA. There are certain segments of your DNA whose job it is to regulate other segments of your DNA. So they don't tell you how to make a specific protein. They just tell you, hey, the thing that comes after me, you should make a lot of that. Because of this, you end up with this. You end up with this hierarchy where you have in the bottom you have the genes that make make the proteins, and then these genes are controlled by other genes. Those other genes are also controlled themselves by another gene. And what this means is that if you change this gene, if you change the one at the top, you can cause a cascade effect that does a bunch of changes. And this is how evolution actually works. But we're gonna go more in depth regarding this in next week's episode. Actually, next week's we're gonna talk about mutations. So we're gonna really get into the nitty-gritty details of how exactly this works. But just know this is like the general idea. This is like the general idea with this kind of. But anyway, yeah, that's the selfish DNA. Don't activate it, otherwise bad things are gonna happen. That's all the facts I have for you. I'm sorry. I don't have any more facts. I'm so sorry. I guess we're gonna have to talk about the birds and the bees.